Hi BookTube, it's Amy. Welcome to the bedroom bookcase here. So this is the shelf where I keep my J.M. Barrie and my Louisa May Alcott books. I've also got some of my Folio Society editions here. And it's kept in the bedroom because the bedroom has curtains on the window. The living room does not have curtains, and I want to protect these books from the bright sunlight that usually comes into the living room. So I'm in here today just for, a change of pace, and because it's later in the day and I've got adequate overhead lighting. But I'm finally back here and I'm going to wrap up my reading of Proust. So I did finish Time Regained a couple of weeks ago, and when I popped in for a short video last time around, I did promise to return with a video to wrap up Proust. So this volume, Time Regained, only is about 530 pages because the rest of this is a guide to Proust and notes. There is a section on characters and then a section on persons and an index of themes. And there's also sort of a summary of sorts that takes you through essentially the main plot points or scenes of this volume. So, of course, I was reading away here, and I knew roughly how much more had to go. And I read page 31, I turned to page 32, and I was surprised that I was done because I didn't really feel as though it was completely wrapping up. It was a little bit surprising. I said, is that it? And then I reread the last half page and final paragraph here just to see if I was missing something. But no, it does just end there. And I'll read for you the final few lines here. And I was terrified by the thought that the stilts beneath my own feet might already have reached the height. It seemed to me that quite soon now I might be too weak to maintain my hold upon the past, which already went down so far. So, if I were given long enough to accomplish my work, I should not fail, even if the effect were to make them resemble monsters, to describe men as occupying so considerable a place compared with the restricted place which was reserved for them in space, a place on the contrary prolonged past measure, for simultaneously like giants plunged into the years, they touch the distant epochs through which they have lived, between which so many days have come to range themselves in time. And so the narrator just sort of leaves us with this fear of his that he's not going to have enough time left to finish this work, to finish this writing, this novel that he has finally started. He spent a good deal of his life idle, and in his ill health at the end of his life, he suddenly realizes what he wants to write and how he's going to do it. And he just ends by saying that he's terrified. He's terrified about his ability to effectively write, to effectively portray the people in his life, and they might not come out as they were in reality. They might seem like monsters, I suppose. And, throughout Time Regained, throughout In Search of Lost Time, some of the characters do come across a bit as monsters. In fact, the narrator himself is a bit of a monster. So I thought I would wrap up here with 3 general thoughts on the work as a whole. Just the first 3 concluding thoughts that come to me. So this is a book about a young man, an older man later, so our narrator. This is a book about a narrator who wastes his life in an idle fashion, climbing in society, talking about how he's going to be this great writer, how he is this great writer, but not doing much more than talking. And then he finds himself in his later years realizing that he has been idle, realizing that he has wasted time, and all he wants to do is recall that time and bring it to the present so that he can write this great work that he always said he was going to write. So that's sort of the plot synopsis, so to speak, of the entire work. My second concluding thought here is that this narrator is an asshole who wouldn't know a healthy romantic relationship if it bit him on the ass. Or any relationship for that matter. Even when it comes to his relationship with his own mother, it's about his own selfish desires. He is selfish, he's obsessive, he's manipulative, he is abusive in some situations, and he repeats these patterns over and over again with the women in his life, and he also repeats certain patterns with the men in his life. And the interesting thing here is that he's not hiding anything. It's all out in the open. We know that he is selfish. We know that he is manipulative. We know that he is obsessed with people. It's all out there in the open for us. Our narrator is obsessive. He is obsessed with any woman that he believes he is in love with. He is that guy who is constantly showing up wherever his latest love interest is. He is that guy who is constantly trying to get a picture of his latest love interest. He is that guy who befriends her friends and befriends her family in hopes of getting a picture of her, in hopes of getting close to her. And this isn't hidden. This is straight out in the open throughout the entire collection of volumes, throughout the entire work. And we see him for what he is. We see him as ill-adjusted, as obsessive, as a little bit on the creepy side, as manipulative, as abusive. And then we see him end up alone at the end of his days. He is without a romantic relationship. He is without any close friends, seemingly. And he is dying, and all he wants to do is write this novel. So it's an interesting work in that regard, I guess. So my third conclusionary thought here is that memory is the key to everything. And I think this is the most interesting idea that comes out of the novel that is In Search of Lost Time. We live through remembered sensations, and it's through those remembered sensations, those memories, that we create patterns of our lives. We decipher or perceive these patterns to help us make sense of things. And of course, in the end, we find ourselves wondering how real these patterns were, what was real and what wasn't, and whether we've made a pattern out of nothing. It's all about perception, and we're not sure, at the end of this novel, and perhaps even at the end of our own lives, what was real and what was not, and what to think about anything. So those are my thoughts now that I've come to the end of this work. But I'm not quite done yet, because I am reading a biography of Proust by Painter, and it's a 2-volume biography, but the author is looking through Proust's life and looking for the character inspirations. It's largely accepted that In Search of Lost Time is heavily autobiographical of Proust's own life. And so many critical treatments of the work in the past have looked for the real life inspirations. Now, the one thing I do like about this biography that I've picked up is that straight out from the start, the author rejects what I think is a somewhat ridiculous notion that all the women in Search of Lost Time are actually men. I mean, you could read it that way, but I think that's a little bit a little bit on the absurd side to say that there are no female love interests in this novel. But that aside, it's an interesting biography so far. And when I wrap up the first volume, perhaps I will pop in here again to talk some more about Proust and talk about my impressions of that biography I'm working my way through.